Pick up a phone charger, look at the cable. Now imagine unwinding it. Past the plastic, past the copper, all the way down to a single thin thread. And imagine that thread isn't metal at all. It's plant fiber, peeled from the inside of tree bark with someone's fingers. Somewhere in the deep past, a person became the very first to take a handful of those fibers. Weak, short, useless things that snap the instant you tug them, and twist them into something that could hold the full weight of a grown adult. You almost never think about it. But that one trick holds up bridges. It stitches wounds shut, it laces your shoes and hangs every picture on your wall. And the oldest surviving scrap of it that anyone has ever found was not made by us. It was twisted, 3 strands at a time, around 50,000 years ago, by a kind of human we spent a whole century dismissing as too simple to think the way we do. When you picture prehistoric technology, you probably picture stone, a hand axe, a spear point, something hard and sharp and heavy, because that is what survives. Stone lasts, bone lasts, and so our entire mental image of the deep past is quietly warped toward the things that don't rot. But some of the most important tools our ancestors ever built were soft. They were made of fiber, and fiber almost never survives. It decays in years, not in millennia. So string is nearly invisible in the archaeological record, which is a real problem, because string might be the single most important invention that almost nobody can see. Think for a second about what it silently makes possible. You cannot build a bow without a bowstring. You cannot make a net, a snare, a fishing line, or a bag to carry things in. You can't lash a sharp stone point onto a wooden shaft, and that one act, hafting, is the difference between holding a rock and holding a spear. You can't sew a fitted piece of clothing. Take cordage away, and something like half of all human technology quietly falls apart in your hands. A net can feed an entire camp in a single morning. One person with a spear cannot. So the real question was never whether string mattered. The question is, when we worked it out, and who we even means. Let's start with the hard evidence and walk backward in time. In a cave called Dzudzuana, tucked into the foothills of the Caucasus Mountains in the country of Georgia, a team led by the scientist Eliso Kvavadze went hunting not for tools but for microscopic clues locked in the sediment. In 2009, in the journal Science, they reported something startling: fibers of wild flax, 30,000 years old. And these weren't raw, tangled plant fibers. Some had been deliberately twisted, some had been knotted, and some had been dyed: turquoise, pink, black, gray. 30,000 years ago, someone in that cave was making colored string. And you do not bother to dye thread you don't care about. That's not survival, that's craft. Here's where it gets physical. In August of 2015, in a cave in southwestern Germany called Hohle Fels, the archaeologist Nicholas Conard of the University of Tübingen lifted a carved piece of mammoth ivory out of the dirt. It was about 20 centimeters long, the length of a large kitchen knife, with 4 neat holes bored straight through it, and the rim of every hole was cut with tiny, precise spiral grooves. For decades, objects like this had baffled everyone. People guessed they were ceremonial batons, or arrow straighteners, or musical instruments, or badges of rank. Nobody actually knew. Then Conard and a useware specialist named Veerle Rots of the University of Liège decided to test the idea that it was a machine. In a study published in Science Advances in 2024, they threaded plant fibers through those grooved holes and used the tool the way its microscopic wear marks suggested it had been used. And it worked. The grooves catch and twist the fibers as you pull them through. With a tool like that, a small team could turn a heap of cattail reeds into 5 meters of strong rope in about 10 minutes. This is a Stone Age machine, roughly 35 to 40,000 years old, built to manufacture rope by the armful. Now the picture gets richer. Jump forward to the famous painted cave of Lascaux, in France. The one blanketed in 17,000-year-old bulls and horses and leaping stags. While cataloging that art, a priest and archaeologist known as Abbé Glory spotted something almost anyone else would have walked straight past: a length of fossilized cord, preserved as an impression pressed into the cave floor. The great French archaeologist, André Leroi-Gourhan, studied it. It was around 30 centimeters long, 7 millimeters thick, and made of plant fibers twisted into a proper rope. One idea is that it was a guideline, a literal handrail strung through the blackness so the painters could feel their way in and back out again. Whoever painted those ceilings may well have reached them holding onto a rope. But this is where the story turns, because to see why any of this is a big deal, you have to understand the trick sitting at the center of it. Take a single fiber of bark or flax and pull on it. It snaps almost at once. On its own, it has barely any strength at all. So how do you get from that to a rope that can hold a person's whole body weight? You twist, and twisting does something that feels like magic but is pure physics. When you twist a bundle of fibers together, you squeeze them against each other, and that pressure creates friction between them. The friction is what stops them from sliding apart when the rope is loaded. In fact, and this is the beautiful part, the harder you pull on a well-twisted cord, the tighter the fibers grip one another. Then you take 2 or 3 of those twisted strands and twist them together again, but in the opposite direction. That counter twist is the whole secret. It locks the structure so it can't just unwind back into loose fluff. The result is a material dramatically stronger than the sum of its parts. A fistful of weak threads becomes a cord you can trust with your life. Twist one way, ply the other. That single principle still makes the rope on a ship, the cable on a crane, and the thread in the shirt you're wearing right now. And this is the part almost nobody talks about. In a rock shelter in the Rhône Valley of France called Abri du Maras, a team led by Bruce Hardy of Kenyon College was examining a small stone flake tool, about 6 centimeters long. Clinging to the underside of it was a scrap of cord barely 6 millimeters long. So tiny you need a microscope just to read its structure. But under that microscope, it was unmistakable. 3 separate bundles of fiber, taken from the inner bark of a conifer, each twisted in one direction, and then all 3 plied together in the other. 3-ply cord, the exact twist and counter-twist we just walked through. Hardy's team published it in the journal Scientific Reports in 2020 and dated it to somewhere between 41 and 52,000 years ago. And here is the fact that put it on front pages around the world. The people living in that shelter were not us. They were Neanderthals. Sit with that for a moment. This was no lucky knot in some random tangle. To make 3-ply cord, you have to hold several strands in your mind at once, keep a steady twist in each of them, count them, and then reverse the direction to bind them together. A fixed sequence of steps that has to happen in exactly the right order. Hardy's team argued that this quietly demands an understanding of pairs, of sets, of numbers. That is the raw material of mathematics, and it is the same kind of nested, structured thinking you lean on for language. The old story said Neanderthals were the dim, brutish cousins, strong hands, simple minds. A cord 6 millimeters long is a very small object to carry such a large idea, but set it beside everything else we've now caught them doing. Marking cave walls, wearing shell beads, cooking birch bark down into glue in a carefully controlled fire, and that little twist of string becomes very hard to wave away. I want to be fair to the other side here, because good science argues with itself. The Abri du Maras cord is a single fragment. It was found stuck to a stone tool, not clutched in a skeleton's hand, so a determined skeptic can still ask how much weight one scrap of string can really carry. And not everyone accepts that making cord proves Neanderthals did abstract symbolic mathematics the way we do. Perhaps skilled hands can learn the motion without the theory sitting behind it. That argument is real, and it is not finished. But even the doubters accept the physical fact. 50,000 years ago, a Neanderthal twisted a 3-ply cord. The only fight left is over what it means. And here is the reframe that rearranges everything, the one the textile archaeologist Elizabeth Wayland Barber has spent a career making. We call the deep past the Stone Age, because stone is what came through to us. But Barber argues that if the soft things had survived alongside it, we might call that era something else entirely. The Age of String. Because string is the hidden keystone. It is the invention that quietly unlocks the other inventions. A bow is just a bent stick until you add the string. The net, the snare, the fishing line, the sling that lets a mother gather food with a baby on her back, the fitted clothing that let people walk into Ice Age winters and live. Every single one of them hangs on cordage. String is the technology underneath all the other technologies. We just can't see it, because it rotted away and left the spear points sitting there to take all the credit. So look at what we actually hold in our hands. 30,000 years ago in Georgia, flax that was spun, knotted, and dyed in color. Around 40,000 years ago in Germany, a carved ivory machine built to spin rope by the meter. 17,000 years ago in France, a cord coiled on a cave floor beneath the paintings. And underneath all of it, at least 50,000 years back, the oldest scrap of the lot, 3 strands, twisted and plied, left behind not by us, but by another kind of human altogether. The line does not run neatly from simple to clever, the way we always assumed. The cleverness was there almost from the very beginning, and it never left. Right now, you are almost certainly within arm's reach of it. The seams of your clothes are held together by twisted thread. The shoes on your feet are laced with it. If you drove anywhere today, the tires beneath you are reinforced with plied cord, and the bridge you crossed is very likely hanging from steel cables that are nothing but this same 50,000-year-old idea. Twist one way, ply the other, scaled up in metal. We never actually improved on the concept. We only found stronger fibers to feed into it. Every time you tie a knot, you are repeating a gesture that ties you, in one unbroken line, back to a pair of Neanderthal hands rolling fiber against a thigh in a cold French shelter, discovering that weakness, twisted the right way, becomes strength. All the research is linked in the description.